The rear tire of the silver Mercedes exploded on the loneliest stretch of Highway 47, sending Wendy Foster's heart straight into her throat as she fought to keep the luxury vehicle steady on the rural road. Her knuckles turned white against the steering wheel as she carefully guided the car to the gravel shoulder, dust billowing around her like smoke. When the vehicle finally came to a complete stop, she let out a breath she had not realized she was holding and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the convertible top, and she could already feel sweat beginning to form on her brow despite the air conditioning that was still running. Wendy reached for her phone with trembling fingers, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. No signal. Of course, there was no signal. She had taken this shortcut to avoid the traffic on the interstate, thinking she would save time on her way back to the city. Now she sat stranded on a back road she barely knew, in a car that cost more than some people made in 3 years, without any way to call for help. She stepped out of the vehicle, her Italian leather heels sinking slightly into the gravel. The heat hit her immediately, far more oppressive than the climate-controlled interior of her car. She walked around to inspect the damage, her cream-colored pantsuit already feeling too heavy for the weather. The rear passenger side tire was completely shredded, the rubber hanging in strips like damaged fabric. Perfect, she muttered to herself, pushing her sunglasses up the bridge of her nose. Just perfect. For 20 minutes, she stood by the car, waving hopefully at the 3 vehicles that passed. None of them stopped. One even sped up, as if they thought she might be trying to scam them. She could not blame them, really. This was not exactly the kind of area where people stopped for strangers, even ones in designer clothes standing next to luxury vehicles. She was considering whether she should start walking when she heard the rumble of an approaching truck. This one was older, a blue Ford pickup that had clearly seen better days. The paint was faded in places, and one of the side mirrors was held on with what looked like duct tape. She did not have high hopes, but she raised her hand anyway, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. To her surprise, the truck slowed down and pulled over in front of her car. A man climbed out, and Wendy felt her breath catch slightly. He was tall, probably just over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and arms that suggested he worked with his hands for a living. His dark brown hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges, and he had a few days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. He wore a simple gray t-shirt that had seen better days and jeans that were worn but clean. His work boots crunched on the gravel as he approached. "You need some help." His voice was deep and warm, with a slight rasp to it that suggested he either smoked or spent a lot of time talking over loud machinery. His hazel eyes were kind, though, and Wendy felt some of her tension ease. "I have a flat tire," she said, gesturing to the destroyed rubber. "And no cell service." He walked past her to inspect the damage, and she caught the scent of motor oil and something else, maybe sawdust. "Yeah, that is definitely flat. You have a spare?" "I assume so. I have never actually needed to use it." The corner of his mouth twitched, but he did not say anything mocking. Instead, he nodded. "Pop your trunk. Let me see what we are working with." As he moved to the back of her car, a small voice called out from his truck. "Dad, is everything okay?" Wendy looked over to see a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, peering out of the passenger side window. She had the same dark hair as the man, pulled back in a slightly messy ponytail, and curious brown eyes. "Everything is fine, sweetheart," the man called back. "Just helping someone with a tire. Stay in the truck where it is cool, okay?" "Okay," the girl replied, though she continued to watch with interest. The man was already pulling out the spare tire from the trunk compartment, his muscles flexing under his shirt as he lifted the heavy wheel with practiced ease. "I am Patrick, by the way, Patrick Rivers." "Wendy Foster," she replied. "Thank you so much for stopping." "I was starting to think I might have to walk to find a signal." "You would have been walking for a while," Patrick said as he gathered the jack and tire iron from the trunk. "Cell service out here is pretty much non-existent. until you get about 5 miles closer to town. You are lucky your tire blew here and not further out. He worked efficiently, positioning the jack under the car and beginning to raise it. Wendy watched, feeling somewhat useless. She was not accustomed to feeling helpless. Not in her boardroom, where she commanded millions of dollars in assets. Not in her penthouse, where everything was exactly as she wanted it. But here, on this dusty road with a destroyed tire, she might as well have been a child for all the good her business acumen did her. "Can I do anything to help?" she asked. "Just stay back a bit," Patrick said, not unkindly. "These lug nuts can be stubborn, and if the wrench slips, I do not want it catching you." He grunted with effort as he worked on the first nut, his forearms corded with muscle. The sun beat down on his back, and soon dark patches of sweat formed on his shirt. Wendy felt guilty watching him work in the heat while she stood in her expensive clothes, contributing nothing. "How far were you going?" Patrick asked as he worked, making conversation. "Back to the city. I was visiting a property about an hour from here." "I thought taking the back roads would be faster." She laughed without humor. "Clearly I was wrong. Property? You in real estate?" "Something like that. I invest in various businesses. Real estate is one of them." Patrick nodded, moving to the next lug nut. "Must be nice, being able to invest in things." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a statement of fact, but Wendy felt a small flush of something that might have been embarrassment. "It has its challenges," she said, then immediately felt foolish. What were her challenges compared to someone who clearly struggled more than she ever had? "I bet it does," Patrick said, and this time she detected a hint of amusement. He was not making fun of her exactly, but she got the sense that he found her world somewhat absurd. The damaged tire came off, and Patrick rolled it aside before lifting the spare into place. His movements were confident and sure, the actions of someone who had done this many times before. Wendy found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the concentration on his face as he worked. There was something appealing about his competence, the way he moved with purpose. "Your daughter is very patient," Wendy observed, glancing back at the truck where the little girl still sat, now reading what appeared to be a book. "Sophie is a good kid," Patrick said, and the warmth in his voice was unmistakable. "She is used to waiting while I work." "I wish she did not have to be, but that is life sometimes." "What do you do for work?" "Carpentry, mostly. Some general contracting. Whatever needs building or fixing, really. I am not picky." He tightened the last lug nut and began to lower the jack. "Business has been slow lately, but it will pick up. It always does." There was determination in his voice, a refusal to be defeated by circumstances. Wendy respected that. In her world, she met many people who had been handed their success, who had never had to truly struggle for anything. Patrick Rivers was clearly not one of those people. He packed the tools back into her trunk, along with the destroyed tire. "You are going to want to get a real tire on there as soon as you can. This spare is not meant for long-term driving and definitely not at highway speeds." "I will take it to my mechanic as soon as I get back to the city," Wendy assured him. Patrick closed her trunk and wiped his hands on his already dirty jeans. "You should be good to go then. Drive safe, especially on these back roads." Wendy opened her purse, pulling out her wallet. "Please, let me pay you for your time. You probably have places to be, and I have taken up at least half an hour of your afternoon." Patrick held up his hand. "No need, I was happy to help. Please, I insist." She pulled out several $100 bills, more than he would probably charge for such a simple job, but it felt important to compensate him properly. "Take it. Consider it hazard pay for working in this heat." Patrick looked at the money for a long moment, and she saw something complicated pass across his face. Pride warring with practicality, perhaps. Finally, he shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, really, but I helped you because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted payment." "Keep your money, Miss Foster." Wendy was stunned. In her world, everything had a price. Everyone wanted something. She could not remember the last time someone had done something for her without expecting compensation or favors in return. "Are you sure?" "Positive." He gave her a genuine smile, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Just pay it forward sometime. Help someone else who needs it." Before she could protest further, he was walking back to his truck. The little girl, Sophie, waved at her through the window, and Wendy found herself waving back. Patrick climbed into the driver's seat, gave her one more nod, and then pulled back onto the road, leaving her standing there with her wallet still in her hand. She stood there for a moment longer, watching his truck disappear down the road, before finally getting back into her Mercedes. As she started the engine and carefully pulled back onto the highway, she found herself thinking about Patrick Rivers and his kind eyes and his refusal to take her money. It had been a long time since she had met someone genuinely good, someone who helped simply because it was the right thing to do. The drive back to the city took longer than usual with the spare tire, and the whole time, Wendy could not stop thinking about the man who had stopped to help her. By the time she reached her penthouse apartment, the sun was setting, painting the city skyline in shades of orange and pink. She kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine, standing at her floor-to-ceiling windows and looking out at the glittering city below. Her life was comfortable, she reminded herself. She had worked hard to get where she was, building her investment portfolio from the small trust fund her grandfather had left her into a multi-million-dollar empire. She was only 32, and she was already more successful than most people twice her age. She had everything she could want. Except she was lonely, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, and meeting Patrick Rivers had somehow made that loneliness more acute. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. It was ridiculous to be thinking about a man she had met for less than an hour on the side of the road. They lived in completely different worlds. He was a struggling carpenter with a daughter to raise. She was a wealthy investor who spent her days in boardrooms and her nights at charity galas. There was no universe in which those two worlds intersected in any meaningful way. Still, as she lay in bed that night in her luxury sheets, in her perfectly climate-controlled bedroom, she found herself thinking about Patrick's capable hands changing her tire, about the way he had smiled when he talked about his daughter, about the quiet dignity with which he had refused her money. The next morning, Wendy drove her Mercedes to her mechanic, a high-end shop that specialized in luxury vehicles. While they replaced the spare with a proper tire, she sat in their waiting room and found herself pulling out her phone. She did not even know why she was doing it, but she opened a search engine and typed in Patrick Rivers Carpenter. Several results came up, including a small business page for Rivers Carpentry. The website was basic, clearly designed by someone on a tight budget, but the photos of his work were impressive. Custom cabinets, built-in bookshelves, intricate woodwork that showed real artistry. There were a few reviews, all glowing, praising both the quality of his work and his professionalism. At the bottom of the page was a phone number and an address in a town about 40 minutes outside the city. Wendy stared at that phone number for a long time, her thumb hovering over it. "Miss Foster, your car is ready." She looked up, startled, and quickly closed her phone. "Thank you," she said, standing and smoothing her skirt. She paid the bill, which was substantial but not unexpected, and drove back to her office. The rest of the week passed in its usual blur of meetings and phone calls and reviewing investment opportunities. Wendy was good at what she did, very good, and she prided herself on being able to spot promising ventures before anyone else. She made smart decisions, calculated risks that more often than not paid off handsomely, but throughout it all, she kept thinking about Patrick Rivers. It was absurd, really. She had met him for less than an hour. She did not know anything about him beyond the fact that he was a carpenter with a daughter and kind eyes. Yet something about their encounter had stayed with her, burrowing under her skin like a splinter. On Friday evening, as she was preparing to leave her office, her assistant knocked on her door. "Miss Foster, there is something I wanted to run by you." Of course, Jessica. What is it? You know how you have been wanting to do something more personally hands-on with your charitable giving. I might have found something perfect. Jessica set a folder on her desk. There is a community center in Millbrook that is struggling to stay open. They provide after-school programs for kids whose parents work late, but their building is falling apart and they cannot afford the repairs. I thought it might be the kind of project you would be interested in. Wendy opened the folder, scanning the information. Millbrook. That was the town where Patrick's business was located. What kind of repairs are we talking about? Pretty much everything. The roof leaks, the plumbing is ancient, the electrical needs updating. It is a mess, honestly, but the work they do there is really important for the community. Wendy studied the photos of the building. It was a single-story structure that had probably been built in the 60s or 70s, and it showed every year of its age. But the photos also showed children smiling, playing, learning, the kind of place that made a real difference in people's lives. Set up a site visit, Wendy said. I want to see it in person before I commit to anything. Of course, when were you thinking? Next week sometime. You work out the details. After Jessica left, Wendy sat back in her chair and looked at the folder again. Millbrook, what were the chances? Maybe this was the universe's way of telling her something. Or maybe she was just reading too much into a coincidence. Either way, she was going to Millbrook. The community center was somehow both better and worse than the photos had suggested. Better because the staff was clearly dedicated, the children were engaged and happy, and there was a warmth to the place that no amount of money could buy. Worse because the building was in even more dire condition than the report had indicated. Wendy could see water stains on several ceilings, and when the director showed her the bathroom, she had to hide her shock at the state of the plumbing. We do the best we can, the director, a tired-looking woman named Margaret, explained. But we are running on donations and grant money that barely covers operating costs. Building repairs are just beyond our budget. I can see that, Wendy said. How many children do you serve? About 50 regular attendees, but we get up to 80 during the summer when school is out. Most of their parents work multiple jobs and cannot afford private childcare. We provide a safe place for them to be, help with homework, give them dinner. For some of these kids, the meal they get here might be the only real meal they have that day. Wendy felt something twist in her chest. She donated money to charities regularly, writing large checks to established organizations. But this felt different, more immediate. These were real children with real needs, and this building was failing them. I am going to help, Wendy said, but I want to do this right. I am going to need a full assessment of everything that needs to be repaired or replaced, and then I want to hire local contractors to do the work. This money should help the community in multiple ways. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Miss Foster, I do not even know what to say. This is going to change so many lives. Just send me that assessment as soon as possible. The sooner we get started, the better. As Wendy walked back to her car, she pulled out her phone and looked at that number for Rivers Carpentry again. This was a legitimate reason to call him, she told herself. She was looking for local contractors, and his work was clearly high quality based on what she had seen on his website. This was business. She pressed the call button before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Rivers Carpentry, this is Patrick. Hello, Patrick. This is Wendy Foster. We met last week on Highway 47. You changed my tire. There was a pause. Miss Foster, of course I remember. Is everything okay with your car? The car is fine, thank you. Actually, I am calling about a potential job. I am funding a renovation of the community center in Millbrook, and I am looking for skilled contractors. Based on the work I saw on your website, I think you might be perfect for the job. Another pause, longer this time. That is very generous of you, Miss Foster. But I need to be honest. I am a one-man operation, mostly. I can do the carpentry work, but a full renovation is going to need plumbers, electricians, roofers. That is more than I can handle alone. I am planning to hire multiple contractors. Wendy explained. "But I need someone to coordinate everything, someone who knows the local tradespeople and can ensure quality work. I am willing to pay you to act as a general contractor for the project, as well as doing the carpentry work yourself." "I have never been a general contractor before," Patrick said slowly. "That is a lot of responsibility. From what I have seen, you are more than capable. And honestly, I trust someone who refused payment for helping a stranger more than I trust most of the contractors I have worked with." She paused. "Will you at least come look at the project and give me an estimate? If you decide it is too much, I will understand." She could hear him thinking, could almost feel the weight of the decision he was making. Finally, he said, "Okay, I will come look. When were you thinking?" "Are you free tomorrow? I can make time." They arranged to meet at the community center the following morning. After Wendy hung up, she sat in her car for a long moment, her heart beating faster than it should have been. This was just business, she reminded herself. She was hiring a contractor, nothing more. But she spent an embarrassing amount of time that evening choosing what to wear the next day, finally settling on jeans and a simple blouse, much more casual than her usual business attire. She wanted to be taken seriously, but she also did not want to show up looking like she was going to a board meeting. Patrick arrived at the community center exactly on time, driving the same battered blue truck. He climbed out wearing much the same as before, work-worn jeans and a t-shirt, this one dark blue. He had shaved since she last saw him, though, and she could see the strong line of his jaw more clearly. Sophie was not with him this time. "Miss Foster," he greeted her with a nod. "Please, call me Wendy." "Wendy," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. "Show me what we are working with." She led him through the building, pointing out the obvious problems and some of the less obvious ones that Margaret had mentioned. Patrick said little, just nodded and took notes on a worn pad of paper. Occasionally, he would stop to examine something more closely, running his hand along a wall or peering up at the ceiling with a critical eye. After about an hour, they ended up back at the entrance. Patrick flipped through his notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is a big job," he said finally, "but it is doable. The structure is sound, which is the main thing. Everything else is cosmetic or mechanical fixes. Can you do it?" He looked at her directly, and she was struck again by the intelligence in his hazel eyes. "I can coordinate it, yes. I know good people, people who will do quality work for fair prices, but I need you to understand something. If you hire me for this, I am going to do it right. That means it might cost more than you are expecting, and it might take longer than you want. But the work will be solid. This building will be around for another 50 years. "That is exactly what I want," Wendy said. "I am not interested in cutting corners or doing the cheapest option. I want those kids to have a safe, functional space." Patrick nodded slowly. "Then I will draw up a full proposal for you. Give me a few days to talk to some people and get estimates. I will have something for you by the end of the week." "That is perfect." As they walked out to their vehicles, Patrick said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you doing this? You are clearly successful, clearly busy. You could just write a check to some established charity and be done with it. Why get personally involved in a community center in a small town?" Wendy considered the question. "I guess because I have been writing checks for years, and I have never really seen where that money goes or what difference it makes. I wanted to do something more tangible, something where I could see the impact. Does that sound naive?" "No," Patrick said quietly. "It sounds genuine. That is rare." Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Wendy felt heat rise in her cheeks, and she looked away first. "I will wait for your proposal then. You will have it soon." She watched him drive away and once again found herself standing in a parking lot, watching his truck disappear and wondering what she was getting herself into. True to his word, Patrick sent her a detailed proposal 3 days later. It was thorough and professional, breaking down every aspect of the renovation and providing cost estimates for each component. The total was substantial, but not unreasonable, and Wendy approved it immediately. The work began the following week. Patrick assembled a team of local contractors, all of whom seemed to regard him with respect and trust. Wendy found herself driving out to Millbrook more often than was strictly necessary, ostensibly to check on the progress of the renovation, but really because she wanted to see Patrick. She was falling for him. She could admit that to herself, at least. Every time she saw him, whether he was covered in sawdust and consulting with the electrician or up on a ladder installing new light fixtures, her heart did a little flip. He was so competent, so sure of himself in his element, and yet he never showed off or tried to impress her. He just did good work and treated everyone with respect. The attraction was not one-sided, either. She caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she was not looking. And the way he smiled when she arrived at the site each time made her stomach flutter, but neither of them made a move. Patrick was professional to a fault, keeping their interactions focused on the renovation. And Wendy, for all her confidence in the boardroom, found herself unsure of how to proceed. They were from such different worlds. What could she possibly offer him beyond money, which he had already proven he did not want? One afternoon in late July, about 6 weeks into the renovation, Wendy arrived at the community center to find most of the crew gone. Patrick was alone in what would be the new art room, installing custom built-in shelves along one wall. She watched him work for a moment from the doorway, admiring the careful precision of his movements. "Those look beautiful," she said, announcing her presence. Patrick turned and his face lit up when he saw her. "Hey, Wendy, I did not know you were coming today." "I was in the area," she lied. She had driven 40 minutes specifically to see him. "Where is everyone?" Plumbers had another emergency job they had to deal with, and the electricians finished their part this morning. "Just me today, working on these shelves." "Mind if I watch? Be my guest." She entered the room and sat on the floor, her back against the wall, as Patrick returned to his work. They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of his drill and the occasional murmur of concentration from him. After a while, he said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Why are not you married? Or maybe you are, and I just assumed you were not." "I am not married," Wendy confirmed. "Never have been. I came close once in my mid-20s, but he turned out to be more interested in my money than in me. Since then, I have been focused on my career." Patrick nodded, measuring the space for another shelf. "I get that." "After my wife left, I focused on Sophie and work, did not have time for anything else." This was the first time he had mentioned his wife. Wendy kept her voice carefully neutral. "Your wife left 3 years ago. Sophie was 5. He set down his drill and sat back on his heels. Amanda was never really cut out for small-town life or for being a mother. She wanted excitement, wanted to live in the city and go out every night. When Sophie was born, she tried to make it work, but eventually she just could not handle it anymore. One day I came home and she was gone. Left a note saying she was sorry, but she needed to live her own life. "I am sorry," Wendy said softly. "That must have been incredibly hard." "It was hard on Sophie more than me," Patrick said. "I was hurt, sure, but mostly I was angry. How do you just abandon your own kid?" But Sophie, she did not understand. She just knew her mom did not want her anymore. He shook his head. "Took a long time to help her work through that. Still working through it, honestly." "She seems like a great kid." Patrick's expression softened. "She is the best thing that ever happened to me. Everything I do is for her. The business, the long hours, all of it. I want to give her a good life, you know, want her to know that even if her mom left, she is still loved and valued and important." Wendy felt her heart clench. "She is lucky to have you. I am lucky to have her." He picked up his drill again. "What about you? You want kids someday?" "I do," Wendy said, surprising herself with how quickly the answer came. "I always thought I would have them by now, but the right situation never came along, and I did not want to have kids just to have them. I want to have them with someone I love, someone who will be a true partner." "That is smart," Patrick said. "Kids deserve parents who really want them and are ready for them." They lapsed back into silence, but it felt charged now, full of things neither of them was saying. Wendy knew they were circling around something, that there was an attraction growing between them that was becoming harder to ignore. But she did not know how to bridge the gap between them, how to move from friendly conversation to something more. The renovation continued through August, and with each passing week, the community center was transformed. The leaking roof was replaced, the plumbing brought up to code, the electrical system completely updated. Patrick built custom shelves and cabinets, installed new doors, refinished the hardwood floors in the main room. The walls were painted in bright, cheerful colors chosen by the kids themselves. Wendy was there almost every day, and gradually she and Patrick began spending more time together outside of just discussing the renovation. They would have lunch together, sitting on the front steps of the community center and talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in a small town, about learning carpentry from his grandfather. She told him about her childhood in the suburbs, about the pressure she had felt to succeed, to prove herself. One day in early September, Patrick brought Sophie with him to the work site. The little girl, who was now 8, seemed delighted to see Wendy. "Miss Wendy, Dad said you are the one paying for all this. That is so cool," Wendy laughed. "Well, your dad is the one actually doing the work. He is making it all happen." "Dad is really good at building things," Sophie said proudly. "He built my whole bedroom set. My bed has drawers underneath and everything." "That does sound impressive." Sophie grabbed Wendy's hand with the unself-conscious affection of a child. "Want to see what Dad built in the kids' room?" "It is so cool." Wendy let herself be dragged through the building to what would be the main play area. Patrick had built an elaborate reading nook, with built-in benches and cubbies for storing books and toys. It was beautifully crafted, with attention to details that showed how much care he had put into it. "This is incredible, Patrick," Wendy said, running her hand along the smooth wood. "The kids are going to love this." "I wanted to make something special," Patrick said, watching his daughter climb into the reading nook and test it out. "These kids deserve something special." Sophie looked up at them from the bench. "Are you and Miss Wendy dating?" Wendy felt her face flame red, and Patrick coughed, clearly caught off guard. "Sophie, that is not an appropriate question." "Why not? You like her, I can tell." "Sophie," Patrick said, his tone warning, but the little girl was undeterred. "You talk about her all the time. And you smile whenever she comes here." Wendy felt her heart racing. Did he really talk about her? Did he really smile when she arrived? Patrick looked mortified. "I am so sorry. Kids have no filter." "It is okay," Wendy said, though her voice sounded a bit breathless. "She is observant." "Too observant sometimes," Patrick muttered. Sophie, sensing she had pushed as far as she should, jumped down from the reading nook. "Can I go to the playground next door?" "Yes, but stay where I can see you through the window." As Sophie ran off, Patrick and Wendy were left standing in awkward silence. Finally, Patrick said, "I am really sorry about that." "Do you?" Wendy asked. "Talk about me, I mean." Patrick met her eyes, and she saw vulnerability there, a nervousness that was endearing. "Yeah," he admitted. "I do." "Sophie says I talk about you too much." "You do smile when I arrive," Wendy said. "I have noticed." Hard not to smile when I am happy to see someone. They were standing close now, closer than they needed to be in the empty room. Wendy could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes, could smell the sawdust and wood that clung to his clothes. "Patrick," she said softly, "we should talk about this, about whatever this is between us." "I know," he said. "I have been trying to work up the courage to ask you out for weeks now. But every time I think about it, I remember that we are from completely different worlds. You are a millionaire investor who lives in a penthouse. I'm a small-town carpenter who is one bad month away from serious financial trouble. What do I have to offer you?" Wendy reached up and placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart racing under her palm. "You have yourself to offer, and that is more than enough. Wendy, I am not going to be able to buy you expensive gifts or take you to fancy restaurants. Most nights, I am exhausted from work and I have to help Sophie with her homework and make sure she has dinner and gets to bed on time. My life is complicated and messy and nothing like what you are used to." "Maybe that is exactly what I need," Wendy said. "Maybe I am tired of expensive gifts and fancy restaurants and all the emptiness that comes with them. Maybe I want something real." Patrick searched her face, looking for something. Then, slowly, carefully, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, giving her the opportunity to pull away if she wanted. But Wendy did not want to pull away. She pressed closer, her arms going around his neck, and the kiss deepened. He tasted like coffee and mint, and his arms around her were strong and solid. She felt safe in a way she had not felt in years, maybe ever. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Patrick rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for so long." "Me too," Wendy admitted. "Dad," Sophie's voice called from outside. "There is a really cool bug out here. Come look." Patrick laughed, a warm sound that made Wendy's heart sing. "Duty calls. But Wendy, will you have dinner with me? With us, I mean, Sophie and me, nothing fancy, just dinner at my place. I want you to see my real life, see what you would be getting into." "I would love that," Wendy said. They made plans for Friday evening, and Wendy drove back to the city feeling lighter than she had in years. She had kissed Patrick Rivers. She was going to have dinner at his house. This was really happening. Friday could not come fast enough. Wendy changed clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater, casual but still nice. She had bought a bouquet of flowers, and after much deliberation, a children's book she thought Sophie might enjoy. Patrick's house was a small 2-story structure on a quiet street. The paint was fresh and the yard was neat, but it was clearly the home of someone on a tight budget. The porch steps creaked as she climbed them, and she had to smile when she saw a row of carved wooden animals lined up on the railing, clearly Patrick's work. She knocked, and Sophie answered the door. "Miss Wendy, you are here. Come in." The interior of the house was small but cozy. The furniture was worn but clean, and the walls were decorated with Sophie's artwork and family photos. It smelled amazing, like garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread. Patrick emerged from what she assumed was the kitchen, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that she suspected was his version of dressing up. His hair was still damp, like he had just showered. "Hey," he said, his smile warm and genuine. "You found it okay? Your directions were perfect." She handed him the flowers. "Thank you for inviting me." "Thank you for coming." He took the flowers, looking pleased. "I will put these in water. Sophie, why do you not show Wendy your room while I finish up dinner?" Sophie eagerly grabbed Wendy's hand and pulled her upstairs. Her bedroom was small but charming, and as promised, the furniture was all handmade. The bed had drawers built into the base, and there was a desk with cubbies and a bookshelf that went all the way to the ceiling. Every piece showed Patrick's skill and his love for his daughter. "Dad made all of it," Sophie said proudly. "He says when I get older, he is going to teach me how to build things too." "That is wonderful," Wendy said. She handed Sophie the wrapped book. "I brought this for you. I hope you do not already have it." Sophie tore open the paper and gasped. "The Wild Robot. I have been wanting to read this. Thank you. You are welcome." "Do you like my dad?" Sophie asked with the bluntness of a child. "I do," Wendy said honestly. "I like him very much." "Good. He has been sad for a long time, since Mom left, but he has been happy since he met you." Wendy felt her throat tighten. "He is a really good dad. You are lucky to have him." "I know," Sophie said seriously. "He is the best." They went back downstairs to find Patrick setting the table. Dinner was homemade spaghetti with meat sauce and garlic bread, simple but delicious. They ate together at the small kitchen table, and Wendy could not remember the last time she had enjoyed a meal more. Sophie chattered about school and her friends, and Patrick listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making jokes that had his daughter giggling. This was what a family looked like, Wendy thought. Not expensive meals at upscale restaurants, but this, laughter around a kitchen table and a child who felt loved and heard. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Wendy her favorite board game, and the 3 of them played until Sophie started yawning. Patrick sent her upstairs to get ready for bed, then smiled at Wendy. "Thank you for being so patient with her. I know having dinner with an 8-year-old was probably not what you expected." "It was perfect," Wendy said. "She is amazing, Patrick. You have done such a good job with her." "I try. Some days are harder than others, but she makes it all worth it." Sophie came back downstairs in her pajamas, her hair wet from washing. She hugged Wendy goodnight, which surprised and touched Wendy deeply. "You should come back soon," Sophie said. "I would like that," Wendy replied. After Sophie went to bed, Patrick and Wendy moved to the small living room. They sat on the couch, close but not quite touching. "So," Patrick said, "what did you think? Still interested after seeing the reality of my life?" "More interested," Wendy said. "Patrick, you have something here that money cannot buy. A home filled with love, a daughter who adores you, a life that matters. That is not something to apologize for." Patrick took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I am not going to pretend this is going to be easy. Dating me means dealing with my schedule, with my responsibilities to Sophie, with the fact that I cannot afford fancy dates or expensive gifts." "I do not want fancy dates or expensive gifts," Wendy said. "I want this. I want you." He kissed her again, and it was even better than the first time. When they finally broke apart, Patrick said, "I have to be honest. I am falling for you, Wendy. Hard. And that scares me because I do not know how we make this work with our lives being so different." "We will figure it out," Wendy said. "I am falling for you too, Patrick. I have not felt this way about anyone in years, maybe ever. I do not want to lose this because we are scared." "Okay," Patrick said, pulling her close. "Then let us try. Let us really try to make this work." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Wendy told him about the pressure she had always felt to succeed, about how lonely her life had become despite all her success. Patrick told her about his struggles after his wife left, about the nights he had laid awake worrying about money, about whether he was enough for Sophie. When Wendy finally left around midnight, she felt like she was floating. She drove back to her penthouse, but it felt cold and empty compared to Patrick's small, warm house. Over the following weeks, they settled into a relationship. It was not always easy, juggling their different schedules and responsibilities, but they made it work. Wendy started driving out to Millbrook more often, helping Sophie with homework while Patrick finished up work for the day, staying for dinner and game nights. Sometimes Sophie would fall asleep during movie night, and Wendy and Patrick would sit on his couch, talking quietly or just enjoying each other's company. Patrick came into the city when he could, though it was less frequent. He would meet Wendy for lunch on days when Sophie was at school, and he had a break between jobs. Once, she convinced him to come to one of her company dinners, and she could see how uncomfortable he was in his borrowed suit, surrounded by people who spoke a different language of stock options and profit margins. She left early with him, and they got burgers from a food truck and ate them sitting on a bench in the park, and it was one of the best nights she had ever had. The community center renovation was completed in mid-October, and the reopening was a huge celebration. The entire community turned out, and Wendy stood with Patrick and Sophie, watching as children ran through the renovated space with joy and wonder. Margaret, the director, made a speech thanking Wendy for her generosity, but Wendy deflected the praise to Patrick and his team, who had done the actual work. After the ceremony, as they were walking to their cars, Sophie ran ahead to play with some of the other children. Patrick took Wendy's hand. "This is a good thing you did here, a really good thing." "We did it together," Wendy corrected. "I love you," Patrick said suddenly. "I know it has only been a few months and maybe it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love you, Wendy Foster." Wendy felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too, so much." He kissed her right there in the community center parking lot, with children playing nearby and the golden afternoon sun shining down on them. When they broke apart, Sophie was watching them with a huge grin on her face, and Wendy laughed, not even embarrassed. As fall turned to winter, their relationship deepened. They had their first fight, a stupid argument about Wendy trying to buy expensive Christmas gifts for Sophie that Patrick felt uncomfortable accepting. They worked through it, with Patrick explaining that he needed to feel like he could provide for his daughter, and Wendy understanding that her money could sometimes be more of a hindrance than a help. They compromised, with Wendy agreeing to clear any gifts with Patrick first. Christmas morning, Wendy woke up in Patrick's guest room, having spent the night so she could be there when Sophie opened presents. The modest gifts under the tree were a far cry from the elaborate Christmases Wendy had known growing up, but the joy on Sophie's face was real, and the love in the house was tangible. They had Christmas breakfast together, pancakes and bacon, and then took a walk through the snow-covered neighborhood. Sophie ran ahead, making snow angels, while Wendy and Patrick walked hand in hand. "I have been thinking," Patrick said, "about us, about the future." Wendy's heart skipped. "What about it? I want this to be permanent, Wendy. I want you in my life, in our lives, forever. I know we still have things to figure out, logistics, and where we would live and all that, but I am sure about you, about us." "I am sure too," Wendy said. "I cannot afford a big fancy ring right now," Patrick said. "And I know we have not been together that long, but I also know that what I feel for you is real, and I do not want to waste time being afraid or waiting for the perfect moment." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Wendy Foster, I love you. I love the way you care about people, the way you treat my daughter like she matters, the way you laugh at my stupid jokes. I love how you have made me believe in love again. Will you marry me?" Wendy was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Patrick kissed her, and Sophie, who had apparently been watching, came running over and tackled them both in a hug. "You are going to be my real mom now?" "I would be honored," Wendy said, hugging the little girl tight. They announced their engagement to Patrick's friends and family first, at a small gathering at his house. Then Wendy called her parents, who were surprised but supportive. Her mother expressed some concerns about the speed of the relationship and the difference in their financial situations, but Wendy shut that down quickly. She was 32 years old and more than capable of making her own decisions. The new year brought new challenges and new joys. Wendy started transitioning more of her work to remote, allowing her to spend more time in Millbrook. She bought a larger house there, something with enough space for all three of them and Patrick's woodworking shop. Patrick was hesitant about moving into a house Wendy bought, but they worked through it, eventually deciding that it would be their house, their home, regardless of who paid for it. They were married in May, in a small ceremony at the community center they had renovated together. Sophie was the flower girl, walking down the aisle with serious concentration, and Margaret officiated. Wendy wore a simple white dress, and Patrick wore a suit he had actually bought for himself. When they said their vows, there was not a dry eye in the room. Their honeymoon was a week at a cabin in the mountains, just the two of them, while Sophie stayed with Patrick's sister. It was the first time they had been truly alone together, and it was perfect. They hiked and talked and made love and planned their future. When they returned, they settled into married life. Wendy learned to navigate the complexities of step parenting, figuring out when to step in and when to let Patrick take the lead. Sophie adjusted remarkably well, seeming to bloom with the security of having two parents who loved her. She started calling Wendy Mom about 3 months after the wedding, and Wendy cried for an hour afterward. Patrick's business grew, thanks in part to the visibility from the community center project and in part to Wendy's business connections. She helped him with marketing and bookkeeping, using her skills to support him without taking over. He hired 2 employees, young men he trained personally, and his reputation for quality work spread. A year after they were married, Wendy discovered she was pregnant. She told Patrick by leaving the positive test on his workbench in his shop, and when he came into the house, he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. Sophie was thrilled at the prospect of being a big sister. Their son, Michael, was born the following spring. Patrick cried when he held him for the first time, and Sophie insisted on helping with everything, from diaper changes to bath time. Wendy took a few months off work, something she had never imagined doing before, and found herself loving the slower pace of life, the days spent caring for her son and being with her family. 2 years later, they had another daughter, Emma. Their family was complete, their home full of noise and laughter and love. Wendy still worked, but on her own terms, choosing projects that mattered to her. Patrick's business continued to thrive, and he was able to give his family a comfortable life, something that meant the world to him. One evening, when Michael was 3 and Emma was 1, Wendy stood in the doorway of their living room, watching her family. Patrick was on the floor, helping Michael build a tower out of blocks while Emma crawled around them. Sophie, now 14, was curled up on the couch doing homework, but occasionally looking up to make funny faces at her baby sister. Patrick looked up and caught her watching. "What are you thinking about?" "How different my life is now than it was 5 years ago," Wendy said. "How much better it is. Better than being a millionaire living in a penthouse," Patrick teased. "So much better," Wendy said. "That life was empty. This is everything." Sophie looked up from her homework. "You guys are so cheesy." "You will understand when you are older," Patrick said. "Ugh, I hope not," Sophie said, but she was smiling. That night, after the children were all in bed, Wendy and Patrick sat on their porch, watching the stars come out. Patrick had his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth. "Do you ever regret it?" Patrick asked. "Giving up your old life?" "I did not give it up," Wendy said. "I exchanged it for something better. I still work, I still invest, I still make a difference. But now I have a reason behind it all. I have you and Sophie and Michael and Emma. I have a family and a home and love. That is worth more than any amount of money." "I love you," Patrick said. "I love you too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, then Patrick said, "You know what is funny? If your tire had not blown out that day on Highway 47, none of this would have happened. We would never have met." "I guess I should thank that pothole," Wendy said with a laugh. "I thank it every day," Patrick said seriously. "That flat tire brought me everything I ever wanted but was too afraid to hope for." Wendy turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "I was so lost before I met you. I had money and success, but I did not have meaning. You gave me that. You and Sophie gave me a purpose beyond just making more money. You showed me what really matters." "You saved us too," Patrick said. "I was just surviving, just getting through each day. You made me remember how to really live. You made me believe in love again, made me believe that good things could still happen." They kissed, a soft, gentle kiss full of love and promise. Inside the house, they heard Emma start to cry, probably needing a diaper change or a bottle. They smiled at each other and stood up together, going inside to care for their daughter. Life was not always easy. There were still struggles, still challenges to navigate. Patrick still worked long hours sometimes, and Wendy still had stressful business deals to manage. They argued occasionally, usually about money or schedules or the million little things that couples argue about. But they always worked through it, always came back to the foundation of love and respect they had built. Sophie graduated high school with honors and got a full scholarship to a state university where she planned to study architecture. On the day they dropped her off at her dorm, Wendy cried the entire drive home. Patrick held her hand and reminded her that they had raised Sophie to be independent and strong, and this was exactly what they wanted for her. Michael grew into a curious, energetic boy who loved helping his father in the workshop. Emma was quiet and thoughtful, always watching and learning. They were both happy, secure children who knew they were loved. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Patrick surprised Wendy with a handmade jewelry box, intricately carved with scenes from their life together. The flat tire on the highway, their first dinner at his house, their wedding day, the births of their children, all captured in beautiful detail in the wood. "This is incredible," Wendy breathed, running her fingers over the smooth carvings. "Patrick, this must have taken you months." 4 months, he admitted. I worked on it whenever you were not around. I wanted to give you something that showed our story, something that came from my hands and my heart." Inside the box was a simple silver necklace with a small tire charm hanging from it. Wendy laughed through her tears as Patrick fastened it around her neck. "So you never forget where we started," he said. "I could never forget," Wendy said. "That was the luckiest flat tire in history." They renewed their vows on their 10th anniversary, this time in a bigger ceremony with more friends and family. Sophie flew home from her architecture firm in Seattle, bringing her girlfriend with her. Michael, now 9, was the ring bearer, taking his job very seriously. Emma, 7, read a poem she had written about love and family. When Patrick and Wendy recited their vows again, they added to them, incorporating all they had learned about love and partnership in 10 years of marriage. They promised to continue growing together, to keep choosing each other every day, to build a life that honored both of them. "I promise to remember that it is not about where we came from or what we have," Patrick said. "It is about who we are together and the love we share. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams while pursuing my own, to love you through all the challenges life brings. I promise to remember that the best things in life are not things at all," Wendy said. "I promise to value our love above all else, to make our family my priority, to never let success or money or anything else come between us. I promise to keep choosing you, keep choosing us, every single day." As they kissed to the applause of their loved ones, Wendy thought back to that hot afternoon on Highway 47, standing beside her broken-down Mercedes in her expensive clothes, feeling lost and alone. She had been so focused on her career, on building her wealth and her success, that she had forgotten to build a life. Patrick had changed all that. He had shown her what really mattered, what real wealth looked like. Not the balance in her bank account or the portfolio of investments, but the love of a good man and a family who needed her as much as she needed them. They danced together at the reception, swaying slowly as their children watched and their friends celebrated around them. Patrick pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "Thank you." "For what?" Wendy asked. "For stopping that day. For not driving past me on the highway. For taking a chance on a struggling carpenter with a complicated life. For loving me and Sophie and our family. For making every day an adventure." "Thank you for stopping," Wendy said. "For seeing past the expensive car and the designer clothes to the person underneath. For showing me what I was missing. For giving me a family and a home and a love I never thought I would find. For making me happier than I ever imagined I could be." They kissed again, and Sophie groaned dramatically from nearby. "Seriously, you two, get a room." "That is our mom and dad," Michael said loyally. "They are supposed to kiss." "Plus, it is romantic," Emma added. "Like a fairy tale," Patrick laughed, pulling his family close. "It is better than a fairy tale. It is real." As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, Wendy looked around at her life, at the family she had built with Patrick, at the love that surrounded them. She thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago, driving alone on that highway, successful but empty. She barely recognized that woman anymore. That flat tire had been the best thing that ever happened to her. It had brought her Patrick, had brought her Sophie, had brought her to this life full of love and meaning and purpose. She would not change a single thing about the journey that had brought her here. Patrick took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers the way he always did. They stood together, watching their children play, watching their friends and family celebrate around them. They had built something beautiful together, something that would last. "I love you," Patrick said, the same words he said every day, words that never lost their power. "I love you too," Wendy replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. And as the stars came out above them, they held each other close, grateful for that chance meeting on a dusty highway, grateful for the love they had found, grateful for the life they had built together. It had not always been easy, navigating their different worlds and building a life together. But it had been worth it, every challenge and every struggle, because they had faced it all together. Years would pass, and they would continue to face life's ups and downs side by side. They would celebrate Sophie's wedding and welcome her children into the family. They would watch Michael graduate from college and start his own woodworking business, carrying on his father's legacy. They would see Emma discover her passion for teaching and change the lives of countless children. Through it all, Patrick and Wendy remained each other's constant, each other's home. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. And whenever anyone asked them how they met, they would smile at each other and say it all started with a flat tire on Highway 47, a chance encounter that changed everything. Because sometimes, the best things in life happen when you least expect them. Sometimes, all it takes is one person stopping to help, one act of kindness, one moment of connection to change the entire course of your life. And sometimes, the person who stops to change your tire ends up changing your heart instead.